Hey, good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Yeah, I know you're sick, so sorry. Let's not go into any details, but you look good. So no, if I wanted to brought it up, no one would tell. But just in case you have to log off to go sneeze or cough or whatever you're sick with, we will understand. Our resident attorney in resident attorney, whatever he is. I'm not paying him
I
anything. So
like we from now on, he is the resident attorney in residence. Can we
okay.
call him resident attorney in residence Esquire? Uh,
So Bart will take over if all of a sudden I'm talking to myself because you're out sneezing somewhere. So Professor, I don't want to, as you know this clearly. I do not want to be talking about President Trump every day for 4 years. I know a lot of my friends apparently do, but I don't. So it kind of bums me out that we're going to be talking about President Trump a little bit today. Where are you? Do you like talking about him every day, all day?
no, and in fact, I heard somebody joke, and they were like, "Welcome to year one of the Trump administration," because that's what it's only been a month, and it feels like it's been a year already. You know,
Exactly, and I don't want to do this over and over and over. And clearly, he's got the staying power for at least whatever it is, 3 weeks. But we're not going to talk directly. Yeah, we are. We'll talk directly about Trump, but I'm going to try to make it indirectly whenever possible. We've talked about the role, like 3 weeks ago, we talked about the role of Article One powers, Congress. And then last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about Article Two powers, the executive. That's Trump. Okay, this week, and we've talked about the courts quite a bit, but I kind of want to talk about the role of courts in relationship to citizenship. So, Article Three powers. Because I get, I do it myself. I talk about Trump, even though I don't want to be talking about Trump. But I have hundreds of citizens that are friends of mine across the spectrum. And for the most part, my Trump friends are kind of actually happy at all this. You might be happy about most of this. I'm actually pleased over some of this. I think it's a really fascinating experiment in limiting government, and we'll see if it works. For example, but I think a lot of us are wasting time, and you are the master advisor on non-wasting time. You and I don't know if it's because you're a professor and you're trying to tell a student how to
I think
pass
it's
a
because
test.
I'm lazy. I don't like, and I've had bureaucrats wasting my time for so long, and I'm lazy. I need plenty of time for staring off into space and reading history books. So,
That's probably true. Well, it's so self-deprecating. That is not in vogue right now. You are the best of the very bestest, Professor. That's in vogue right now.
okay.
Okay, but for the sake of saying a little lazy, that's kind of nice. But I don't think most of my friends are lazy. They're just really upset, and so they're like every nit nat this and that and the other thing. They are like complaining to the Facebook and Twitterverse and whoever will listen and argue with them. And I'm trying not to steer them because they can do whatever they want with their time and their Facebook page and whatever. But it does seem like if they're artificially upset and they're sharing that,
Mhm.
and there's some guy like me who actually has a lot of experience in how to be effective. I'm willing to weigh in sometimes. And then, of course, they all get mad at me and they see a flag picture in my bio, and everyone starts calling me a Hitler or something because I have an American flag in my bio. So they call me a Trumpist and then a fascist. And then I don't get it. The world is so weird right now, Professor. Can you just
Well,
give me
how
some
about this?
guidance?
Has that ever changed your mind? Has
Oh
somebody
yes.
calling you a fascist ever convinced you, like, oh, that is
Well,
a reasonable
I've been
person?
pretty consistent on not wanting to be a fascist and to try to fight fascists wherever I see them. So
So,
I, I don't know, but can you just give us some overall guidance on the three
yeah,
branches of
I mean,
government
this
and the role of
right off the top of my head, I'd like the don't confuse activity with accomplishment, and don't confuse sharing of with accomplishment. That, like, sharing your feelings, especially publicly. If you every day sat down and recorded how you felt about the Trump administration every day on Facebook, that would um, that would do absolutely nothing compared to what if you went once a month to your local Democratic Party meeting or your local Republican meeting, and you don't have to do anything. Just go and sit there.
and there'd be
And
one more person in the crowd.
Right. And then eventually people will ask you why you're there and they'll start asking you for advice. And here's some good advice my father always followed, which is if you don't say anything, people just assume you're smart. So, my dad, people thought my dad was a genius because he didn't talk very much. So I would say instead of spending hours and hours being up at night, um, thinking about all of the sick burns you could lay off and all of the worries and anxieties, like there's only one way out of that sort of spiraling depression, and that's with actual work. And actual work means um, uh, join, take that time and if you think about, look at your phone, think about how much time you spent crafting your latest reply to what somebody else said on some message on social media or something, or how much time you spent scrolling through those messages, and just say to yourself, like, you know what? I'm going to carve out 5 hours of my life for civic participation, and 1 hour a month is going to be visiting with my local political party. And how about, I mean, I don't know, visit them both. It's not like they check your ID at the door. No, and you would get a lot more done. You would affect a lot more social change than staying up at night worrying. I mean, that would be my first.
Yeah, I
That's
think
just
that's
my first thought. The other thing, I just got off the phone with my sister, and we were both talking about meetings, and you know this from knowing me. Like, I don't have meetings about meetings. Uh, I just we if we're gonna meet, we're gonna do the actual work, and we're gonna divvy it up, and we're gonna produce the work product. And I always say, like, it's amazing what three smart people can do in 45 minutes. So we say we're gonna meet for an hour. We say hi to each other. We break. We each are in charge of creating 3 paragraphs in 25 minutes, and then we come back and look at what we produced in 45 minutes, like, and then it's done. You can put a bow on it and say, all right, now we've done this thing. And everybody will think you're the hardest working, most productive person in the world because you're the one committee that's actually doing
actually
work.
get something done, and you think it's just laziness because you don't want to meet and then meet after you met, and then just do something.
Yeah, uh, and most people are like, I don't know, they just want to. Most people do just want to, like, talk about their feelings and stuff. So it's
And I get it, by the way. There's nothing wrong with feelings. I like feelings actually. Some
no,
of them are good.
it's important to have friends who you can share feelings with,
Yeah,
but the whole world is not your friend.
right.
Um, I
Okay,
feel
that's
this tension all the time because you're one of the people who tries to drag me out of this because I'm always like, I don't really have anything worthwhile to contribute on this subject, and you're trying to tell me, like, no, you need to produce some writing on this, and I was like, oh,
yeah, you
right.
really do on some. I'll keep after you
Yeah.
on that. Not this show though. So,
Yeah.
Professor, I have another piece of advice similar to yours, and that is you got to go persuade one other person to see your point of view. If you're not persuading a person, then it's all I think it's actually detrimental because you're probably saying stuff that irritates people that get them more upset about you and entrenched in their own position than listening to you. You just got to go ask somebody a question. Hey, what do you think?
I saw that, because we've been quoting Tom Brasino on this for a couple of years now, his famous formulation where he said, well, you must love Trump because this is how you get more Trump.
Yeah,
You acting like this is why people think they need to vote for him. And I saw J.K. Rowling wrote something very similar the other day. I forget exactly what she said, but it was something along those lines, like, you must really want to make sure that Trump stays in power forever, with comments like this. And
well, because
and
if you insult somebody, I had a friend jump in and another long time acquaintance. He's a former state representative. He's a very well respected guy. I happen to disagree with him on equity, probably in the same way I disagree with you on equity. I think you and I have a difference on that word, But so what? We have a difference, maybe. He and I definitely have a difference. He thinks
What's
equity.
our difference? Remind listeners, I don't know what it is. So
Right, right. That's a difference. I do, and there is a time and a place for equity. And he thinks I'm a Marxist. But he didn't call me a Marxist. He just says I wish you'd stop advocating Marxist philosophy by saying equity's okay. I didn't actually get mad at him. I think it's dumb to equate equity with Marxism. It could be, doesn't have to be though. So anyway, I don't want to. I didn't want to bring in that, but my point is I had another friend come in and call him a fascist and whatever, and I go, and then she blocked him. Well, wait, she's in my home, electronic home. She calls him a fascist, and then so he can't see that. And now all of a sudden, I got to go in and either clean it up because I don't want to leave that hanging. Really, that's not helping your cause. You're making me mad at you. Now I got to block you, probably. You know what? You know what? Why are people so weird, Professor? That you're the history professor.
why are people so weird? Because we're human beings,
Okay, I
and
like.
the further away from us they are in real life, the more we treat them like abstractions, not being real human beings.
Okay, well, that's actually a nice bridge to something really substantive. Ready for something really deep?
Okay, hit me.
Okay, thanks. An abstraction. It's way over there. But we elected a president, duly, not quite a majority, but close, and he did win the popular vote. So there's no question the electoral college stuff. We got a duly elected president several weeks into his administration who says we're going to own Gaza. What is the role of Congress, the courts, and citizen when you have a president who says we're going to own Gaza? You don't have to
Well,
defend the policy, but just how should we all react to that? If we're a congressperson, we nod because we don't want Musk to say he's going to primary us. If we're the courts, we wait for somebody to file a lawsuit. If we're, but there's nothing to file a lawsuit yet. But so you just kind of scratch your head. If you're a citizen, you get on Facebook and you tweet mad stuff. Give us some guidance on major public policy issues of the day.
well, I'd rather just remind you. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching and listening to this remember the TV show The Office, and when Michael Scott was in trouble and in debt, and he heard that he needed to declare bankruptcy, he walked outside of his office and shouted, "I declare bankruptcy." And he said, "I declare bankruptcy," right? And we have a president, and he just does this stuff. And now the crazy part is that anything the president says is the policy of the executive branch. But what if it's incoherent and contradictory? And it means that everybody who's under him is left sort of confused as to the policy that they should pursue. And he can say many things, but he can't actually conjure reality. I have no idea why he said what he said about Gaza, or what it was that popped into his head at that micro instant when he said it.
He did double down the next day when his administration tried to walk back his words. He came back and tweeted directly on it. No, I mean what I say. We're going to own Gaza.
Um, I, I it means nothing until you find out how. All of these things, and actually, maybe you're right. There is a sort of deeper point to this, which is that for far too long, Americans have not cared about process. All they've cared about is having someone share their feelings. To get back to our earlier point, right? All I want is for someone to express my feelings, and I don't care if anything ever gets done, and I don't care if it's real, because it actually has no effect on my life. But I just want someone in there saying things so that I can pretend like my hero is winning. And if and if you who cares about reality? Like that just is reality. And
So,
so if Donald Trump goes in there and says, like, I mean, no one actually seems to care that he didn't build a wall. No one seems to care. Like no one seems to care that the water release here had nothing to do with sending water to Los Angeles. All he did was rob us of water that we were supposed to be using this summer. He just flushed it out to into nowhere, and risked flooding some towns. And none of that water went to LA.
Or to
But
fight a fire.
yeah, or to
But we
fight a fire, went anywhere. It just wasted, I mean, the most precious resource we have around here. And I don't know, did anybody even care?
And
All they were,
even if you're shorter this summer and there's some report on it and it's tracked down how much people still won't care.
no.
Right.
And it, people need to start caring about process as part of their civic life. We've talked about this for years, but when nobody cared, when uh, you know, uh, nobody cared when Bill Clinton pardoned people at the last minute, or when this is another thing people forgot Bill Clinton did. He changed like water quality regulations at at the last minute of his administration, just so Bush would have to change them back, so that the story would run Bush, put more arsenic in your water or something. Like just completely ridiculous stuff. And if you at the time were like, "Oh, what a sick burn," I'm so glad President Clinton did this, or we've talked a lot about, we picked on Obama for the same stuff, but in every one of those cases, if you didn't care because he was doing it for your side, well, now you should probably care. And all of the time, I would love it, by the way, if Democrats in Congress would start passing laws taking some of this power away from the president. Now have we convinced you that you that you have given too much power to the executive? Like, what does
Well,
it take?
you're giving me
Or
lots of
are you just going to
questions,
wait
but
them out and so you can install your own national daddy for 4 years?
I got to interrupt you though. Democrats can't. They can propose a piece of legislation, I
That's
think,
what they should be doing.
but they can't even get it to a committee though,
No,
because
no,
the
but what they can do is there are plenty of Republicans who would want to pass legislation limiting the power of the executive and the government. Like, you think you're not going to get half the Republican caucus on board with limiting the size and scope of the federal government? Like,
I think it's an interesting procedural question, but Bart may be able to help us out on that. I know state legislature is different than Congress, but I don't think you, with a committee chairman, I don't. You can create a bill and you can put a name to it and co-signers to it, but you can't even get a hearing though. So I don't think there would be a Republican signer on to that.
well, I I just think that bills, Democrats still find a way to get post offices named. So there is still a process, even when you're in the minority. And the other thing you could be doing is proposing this stuff, even though it's not going to pass. I mean, this is one of the things that you should be doing when you're out of power. And I always found
Okay,
it
so
frustrating
Professor,
when, yeah, go
let's
ahead.
get to a different topic. On
But
that,
the other thing, getting to did you want to transition to the judicial branch? Uh,
well,
or
yeah,
I'll let you walk me there then.
yeah. Well, let's take another one besides Gaza. We can go back to Gaza if we wish. I was under the impression that every federal government employee had to raise their hand and swear or affirm to uphold the Constitution. Has that happened with Elon Musk and his teams? Are they? Do you know? I googled it this morning. I looked around and I couldn't find it. Is this Department of Government Efficiency? Are they all sworn in?
I don't know. I would assume that for the ones who are actual employees drawing a salary,
I'm not sure they are employees, though, are they? I thought Musk said, "Hey, I want you all to come work for free," or maybe he's paying for them out of his own pocket. You think they're federal? You think they're federal government employees?
can't do it. No, because what they took over was the existing digital service of the Obama administration and just renamed it.
So you think they have to be federal government employees?
So everyone who has access to actual, you know, the ability to send those emails out from a government account to a government account, like that's all coming from someone who is a government employee.
Okay, Jake and Bart, I think we need to double check that they are all government employees, including Elon Musk. And I'd like to know whether they swore to uphold the Constitution when they became a government employee, which I thought all government employees did. But I'm not, I guess, 100% confident because of this.
And who
Can
knows? I don't know if they have to like put their hand on the Bible, in that anymore,
That's a good point. You
you
don't
know.
think
Yeah, I don't think they have to do all that, John. But one of the, yeah, I have not seen any reporting that actually says who the people working for Elon Musk are employees of. And I'm not sure anybody really knows right now, to be honest.
Well, but to Professor Tootle's point earlier, don't we have to know this kind of procedural stuff as citizens? And I don't know. I'm embarrassed that I tried to look and I couldn't find it out. Is a special government employee, Jake says. So, Bart, you don't think every employee, I think every postman is sworn to uphold the Constitution. You don't think a Doge worker does?
I don't have any idea now. I
Okay, well,
honestly don't. I was a state employee for a really long time, and I never took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution of Colorado and all that stuff.
wait, you
I
wrote
took
all
an
our
oath of
laws.
office as an elected official, but not.
You wrote our laws in Colorado for 35 years, and you were never sworn to uphold our Constitution?
No, no. I took an oath of office to be an attorney,
Right.
and that
Ah,
required me to uphold the Constitution.
That's different. Let's get to that in just a second. Okay, back to Professor Tootle. Okay, so we're not sure on Gaza. We're not sure on Doge. How about USAID? Did Congress act on this, and does the president have the ability to get rid of an entire massive initiative of the United States just on his own? Because I guess tonight he's going to lay them all off. At least that's what he said.
Well, yes, no, and yes. I don't, or no, yes, and no. The It was initially a an executive order, but there was later a law passed by Congress authorizing it, and the funding has also been authorized by Congress. So the answer is we don't know yet what the legal limit of who he can fire, because it's clear that you can fire sort of high level people and who clearly serve at the pleasure of the president. But
That's 1,000 federal employees. Very clear. In
but
fact, they
it's
all.
actually never been legislated, or it's never been adjudicated in the modern era, and there's quite a conflict within the courts. In fact, I don't remember what the precedent was, but some people say that the closest thing to a legal precedent is something that was in a dissent, therefore is not supposed to be binding at all. But apparently, something that Scalia said in a dissent once seems to be what the courts are following, instead of like, and even though he wasn't even in the majority opinion when he said it, it's like none of this stuff has ever been adjudicated in the in anything approaching the modern era.
Okay, so we're on unknown territory. Does that concern you?
Yes, yeah, I don't know. Yes, all of it concerns me, because in every one of these questions, in order to know if it's a good idea or if it's a bad idea, again, I need to know about the process.
You know,
And
know a lot
he
more.
said, nobody reports on the process. It's so hard to get good reporting. And, I have to rely on, I do rely a lot on the Dispatch and the Free Press, but those are only two news entities. And if we could somehow convince reporters for all of the other news agencies to begin having permanent reporters who actually report on process, then we would be able to have news coverage on this stuff that we could rely upon. But, we have these kind of two tiny little startups that are, and really Free Press doesn't even do this as much as Dispatch does, but Dispatch can't be expected to cover every news and legal story that happens to come down from, and it's also raining out of Trump's mouth every day. So it's a failure of our media and educational institutions that nobody is focused on process. And it's something that probably indicates this has been a problem in our culture for going on a half century now.
For a long time now.
Yeah, we don't even, if we've been doing it this way for 50 years, now nobody even remembers a time when anybody cared about this. You can't even find a retired old professor who remembers this stuff.
Okay, Professor, I want to switch gears again and talk about one that you accurately thus far predicted, and that is President Trump declaring an end to birthright citizenship. And a court immediately stated, and it was a Reagan appointee who said, I've never seen something so blatantly unconstitutional in my life. This is just on its face, ridiculous, absurd, ever. I've never, in my 40 years of on the bench, I've never seen something so, kind of your words. I think he was listening to our show, and then you took the words out of your mouth. Do you have any other reflections on, the president can say whatever he wants, right? Just like you and I can say everything we want, as long as we're not inciting a riot or in an employment contract or something. We can say all sorts of stuff. So the president can. He declared it over.
He can, but it's a bad idea.
Yeah, that's a bad. Agreed on that, but he can say it, right?
And then makes him a bad president. It makes him a bad president.
Wait, expand on that. What do you mean it makes him a bad president?
Well, by my mind, in order to be a good president, you would have to fulfill the role of both being the chief of the government, but also the head of state, because we don't have a separate king and prime minister. We have only a president. And so therefore, I would say you're being a bad head of state when you're being responsible with what you say, when you're being irresponsible with what you say. And you're being a bad head of government when the policies you're pursuing are so incoherent that nobody knows how to follow them. And they have no internal logic at all. And it makes it impossible for anyone, even if you have a good idea, it makes it impossible for anyone to know what to do. Ulysses S. Grant, one of the reasons that he was a really good general, Dwight Eisenhower, one of the reasons he was a really good general was that they were both good writers. And in order to be a good general, you have to be able to write orders that cannot be misunderstood and that make sense for the battlefield as a whole. Like, being a clear thinker and a clear writer is essential to leadership. And Donald Trump is neither of those things.
But he's the twice elected president, which is clearly amazing, and the top of the world's #1 person in the world as far as power. So it works for him somehow.
Well, it works for being elected, but there's getting elected, which he's managed to do twice. But there's also the job of governing. And just because you are good at getting yourself, I feel like President Obama was really good at getting himself elected president. But I don't think he was good at governing. So those are different skills.
And back to your earlier point, and people don't care. We're all just thrilled that he's taken an axe or a bludgeon or a chainsaw to the federal government, and we
not to be too cynical, because I think there are still a lot of Americans who do care, but right. I think for many people, all they want is someone to verify their feelings and make them feel like they are both hero and victim. you know,
And be clear, you think this is one of those all sides cases. This applies just as much to the Republicans as it does Democrats.
well, I just don't see any difference in governing philosophy between uh, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, in terms of the governing principles. I mean, like how they think a president is supposed to act. Um, it's just one version of it is, I don't know. This is one of those who burns hotter in hell, Hitler and Stalin kinds of questions.
Yeah, fair
Like,
enough.
is it better that Joe Biden pretended to follow the rules a little bit while doing stuff that was entirely lawless? Or is it better that Donald Trump is quote unquote being honest with his dishonesty? Like, I don't know. That's a question for philosophers that I probably need. Uh, I don't know where I fall on that.
Fair enough. Let me lead you to the final route, and then we're going to open it up to questions among everyone. So the president is using strong arm tactics, which is no surprise. He's kept with his current modus operandi for his business dealings for the last 40 years, probably.
Always say it, they're incompetent strong arm tactics.
Fair enough. I stand corrected. I like that. Okay, his incompetent strong arm tactics, and it's been the same him apparently for his whole career. He is what he is. But what is it? There is a change, though, for the most part, on Congress. Congress isn't as independent as it was for most of my life. Agree or disagree? I think they're kowtowing to the president for a variety of reasons, mostly logical, but also unfortunate. They're worried about getting primaried. That's
What year were you born?
1966.
And it's 2025 now. And let me make sure I can answer your question. So from 66, let's make it from 65 to 25.
Years. 60 years, damn it. I'm getting old.
60. So for the past 60 years, and then your question is for most of your life, Congress
has been ruggedly independent. They've been jealous of their own authority, constitutional authority, and they're willing to yield their might against the president.
I think it stopped in the second Obama administration. So probably it stopped during the Obama administration. So how old were you in like 2000 and 2010,
Yeah.
So it's, so I'd say for most of your life, Congress did care about its own power and authority.
So
but
through that real quick, and then I got that one last question. What happened to Obama, and then why didn't it change back with the next administration? Have us, whoever listens to this show, have us understand your point here. What's happened in the last.
Well, this isn't necessarily even just coming from me. This came from people within the Obama administration. They would go to, when Obama had control of all three houses of Congress, he would go to members of his own party and say, look, we've got this great issue and you should put forward this bill because, you can then, run for office for Congress next time and say it was your idea and it's gonna, it's an 80% issue. And those members of Congress would then respond to President Obama, why don't you just do it via executive order? I don't want this. I don't want my name on this because you're right, because it is an 80% issue, which means that I'm going to have to go back home and hear from the 10% of the people who are really loud and who are going to primary me on this issue for not taking the more radical stance. And President Obama himself and his staffers have all confirmed that this happened throughout his administration.
You're talking specifically about Dreamers, and instead of a nice congressional act, Obama just decreed it. Which are you talking about Dreamers, or are you talking about?
I don't know if in that anecdote I was just relating if that was specifically about the Dream Act, but that is something that happened to the Dream Act.
Yeah, Congress didn't need to act. Let's just have the president do it.
Well, and not only that, but they had a bill that the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats, I mean, there would have been, I want to remember, I don't want to misremember this, but I think at the time, a congressman told me there might have been 20 people out of 435 who would have voted against the Dream Act that they had.
Yeah. And this is real people's lives too. So I like this part of the story because this isn't some
Yeah,
theory.
because now these are the people who are scared about getting deported.
Yeah.
This is something that could have been fixed back in the second Obama administration with, 415 out of 435 members of Congress voting yes on it.
But it's better to have animosity towards
But,
the other side
right.
rather
But they
than have,
wanted to use it as a campaign issue in the midterm elections. And
okay.
they wanted to fundraise, and even more important, they wanted to fundraise off of it.
Do you think it's possible that Democrats are doing the same thing now? That they're actually, Trump just keeps doing thing
I
after thing after
I
thing.
don't have a good idea of that yet. My impression from Democrats is they don't know what to do right now.
There's a lot of that. But I'm asking friend after friend after friend, don't you actually want to win on this? I mean, do you want to win or do you want to just complain? And I don't know. I'm actually thinking a lot of my friends just want to complain.
I
Okay.
just haven't. So all my, powerful liberal friends, uh, some of them are expressing frustrations that are very similar to what we've already described. And then the only other thing that I've heard is I've heard anger and despair and confusion,
Freshman.
but no alternative, path of action.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens in coming weeks. Okay. My last question. And Bart needs to weigh in on this one too, if he's still around. Um, all this politics and governance, different fields, but it's the same person. It's a mayor, a council, a congressperson, a senator, a president, a governor. It's the same person that has two roles. And they basically can say whatever they want to say until the courts get involved. And I'm telling you, Professor, and I want your history approach, and I want Bart to correct me. I'm telling you, courts are a different world. When you want to talk process, it is all process. And I do know that every single one of them is an officer of the court, not just representing the President of the United States. They are also an officer of the court. And they have to tell the truth in their filings, in their written word. And when they're in front of a judge, they can't lie. Now, there's an exception of opening statements in a criminal trial, opening and closing, I think. But they can't lie in court. And when they do, they get disbarred and they get punishment. I mean, it is a totally different world in the legal profession. Agree or disagree, Professor? And then Bart, you add something to it.
Agreed.
So that's an essential check and balance that's written into our Constitution that many countries don't have, still to this day, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Bart, any nuance that we should be thinking about as citizens on our role with Congress, the president, citizen activism? It's now your specialty, the courts. Is there something that we should be thinking about on how to influence the courts? Because they're clearly a partisan witch hunt, or not opposite of a witch hunt. They're just cronies of the president. That's all they care about. They're just like politicians, right?
Well, I disagree with the premise of what you just said. I think judges are not inherently political animals, particularly once they get on the bench. And frankly, since I am a legal nerd, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how the many lawsuits that have been filed so far against various policies that the president has put in effect, either by executive order or just by doing them.
Do you know how many have been filed, by the way?
I don't know the exact number. I know the number is growing.
It's a couple dozen, though, isn't it?
Oh, I think so, at least. My guess is there's probably more by now.
And there's at least 3 that have already been, a judge has put in a temporary order on at least 3 of his actions, right?
Yeah. Some of the bigger ones, the impoundment of money, the whatever you call it, the birthright citizenship. Those are the 2 I've heard about.
Well, the other one, letting the contract with federal employees to resign by today,
Yeah, there's a
Um,
lawsuit on that going
yeah.
on. I think they extended the deadline for federal employees to do the buyout that he was proposing.
Well,
You know,
there's a
and there's
hearing on
no
that on
law that
Monday.
even
So, so,
authorizes that.
so tell us what judges and lawyers do that are different than politicians and elected officials.
Well, I think lawyers and judges are concerned about, Stephen, I don't know if Stephen said this or whether I'm just imagining it, but, basically lawyers and judges have to show their work. They can't just stand up and make statements like the United States is going to own Gaza. Judges have to actually say, okay, this is my decision, this is why. And the lawyers are responsible for presenting arguments to the judges that they can actually use, based on precedent, based on what the law says, based on what the Constitution says. So I think you're going to get this is going to be an interesting period of time. I don't know that the courts have had to look at some of the issues that are coming up right now, since probably, I mean, Stephen, you may have to weigh in on this part of it. I think early in the Republic, if you will, after we were founded, there were some decisions about when the president can fire someone, when the president can hire someone. But since then, it's been pretty much not an issue that everybody gets all worked up about. But I think they're going to get worked up about it now. So,
well, it's funny because literally the foundational case of judicial review, Marbury versus Madison, was about whether or not these officials could receive their commissions. Like who is the president? Who's in charge of hiring and firing and judges and it was it's sort of always been a big deal, especially during the Jackson era. In came the so-called spoils system, where the idea was that everyone in government, I mean, this was one of the foundational ideas of the Democratic Party. I mean, if you're a Democrat, this is why one of the reasons why your party exists is to enact the idea that the president should be able to hire and fire everyone in the federal government, because
Now, does that surprise you that I don't know that, Professor? Really?
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. That was
and there's
one
still
of the...
a school of legal thought that actually believes that. It's called the unitary executive theory. And there are so-called Unitarians out there
Well, but that's
who are
mostly on the
pushing those
conservative
kind of
side, right?
arguments.
Well,
Isn't that on the conservative side now, Bart?
I don't know. I think there are probably liberals and conservatives that make that argument.
Okay.
So they would claim falsely, I think, that they are Hamiltonians, the people with the unitary theory of the executive. But their argument is that there is one president at a time, and he's in charge of the whole executive branch, right? And that's a little bit different. That Hamiltonian perspective was one of the things the Democrats were pushing against in their founding. So their way of pushing against the idea of the unitary theory of the executive was to say, no, these should all be political appointments elected by a democratic process, and therefore whoever is the president deserves the spoils of victory. That's why it was called the spoils system. And it was essentially how the federal government functioned. And the story of how it was undone is also tied up in the story of racism, because after the Civil War, all political appointees, I mean, remember from 1860 to 1932, that was 72-year period where you only have two Democratic presidents, right? Grover Cleveland and Woodrow Wilson. So you have Republicans in charge of the executive branch for 72 years, minus 16. And again, Grover Cleveland non-consecutive, and Woodrow Wilson during wartime, right? So, so you can imagine how Democrats felt about this system that they had implemented, the spoils system. And they had also run every white person basically who was a Republican out of office. So that meant that the only Republicans in the South were black people. And if the only Republicans in the South are black people, and the Republican Party is in charge of all of the government jobs, it meant that those jobs were all going to black people. And black people were in charge of like, a third of the patronage jobs in America. And Democrats wanted a way of firing all of those black people and getting them out of office. So they had to find a way of supporting something to get rid of the spoils system, and that's where civil service came from. It was called civil service reform, but the supporters of civil service reform actually came in, I would say, two big buckets. The first big bucket is people who wanted better government and more efficiency and, qualified people in jobs. But the other group of people were racists who wanted to fire black people.
Mm.
Uh, and um, and so the very reason why Trump can't fire a lot of people now is because they have civil service protection. And I guess in each one of these things, I know people want to use history to beat each other up over all of this, but I would just say, like, stay out of it. Make an argument on its merits today, because once you start digging into this history and claiming that one side or the other are the sort of the good guys, I mean, trust me, there's a 50-year period that you don't want to take credit for. So it's a complicated legal story about who has the power to hire and fire. In fact, it was hiring and firing that led to the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, right? Because Congress passed this law called the Tenure of Office Act that later the Supreme Court said was unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
But that law said, I mean, in effect, it was another version of what I would want Congress to do right now, which is Congress said the president is abusing his power as the chief executive over the executive branch, in this case, Andrew Johnson. So they passed a law saying you can't fire people who we've approved of. And the Supreme Court later said you can't do that. But when Andrew Johnson violated that law, that's why he was impeached. So I really think what we're really kind of lacking is people who know the political history of the United States in the 19th century, because everybody thinks that all this stuff is just brand new and we've never gone through any of this stuff. And I'm like, well, just because you've never heard of Andrew Johnson or Rutherford B. Hayes, like almost all of this stuff, there's a 19th century corollary where we went through this to begin with.
Professor, didn't you say 3 weeks ago, or maybe it was 4, it can't be 4, that President Trump could be, or maybe should be, impeached because of firing all the inspector generals without giving Congress 30 days notice? I mean, isn't it the law pretty clear? Was it over that issue, or is it over another issue?
But here's the thing, like, I just don't know if he's actually done it yet. We don't know what President Trump is actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what he has actually done. And because we can't trust what he says, and we can't trust what the political opposition says.
And the media is not up to the standard.
The media is not doing us any favors.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like if you don't know somebody there. I mean, I had friends who reached out to me last week to talk about this water release thing. And I was just shocked. I was like, how is the media portraying this where you live? Because I can tell you that, I live in a place that Trump carried by, I don't know, 60, 70% of the vote. I don't know if Jake can figure this out. But every single person from the time that they are separated from the teat of their mother in this valley knows how this water works. I'm pointing at it, right? Everyone knows what goes into Lake Success, what goes into Lake Cahuilla. Everyone knows about the Army Corps of Engineers and where those water releases go. They know about Tulare Lake and how and they know about how we're a unique water system, even within California and the different, essentially segmented water systems of California. And everyone who's involved in public policy knows how those systems are circumvented or linked together through the water system of California. And these people, most of them are Trump supporters. And when this happened, I still don't know what the answer is. But either what was done was a stupid person saying to do an incredibly stupid thing. I mean, literally, the first order for a water release would have released enough water to flood 2 cities that had flooded 2 years ago. And for no reason. Like, it would have just been like, just destroy 2 American cities. The order has come down, right? Like, and the question that people have is this a stupid person ordering a stupid thing? Or is this a stupid order that somebody who hates President Trump was like, well, this moron wants to do it, pull the lever. Let's give him what he ordered so that he will see how dumb this is. And we still have no answer. I'm friends with an editor for a local paper, and I have another friend who works for an entity called SJB Water, and they just cover water, right? My local newspaper has 1 local reporter, right? We have we have an entity that with 5 reporters that just covers water, right? This is a well-covered issue where I live, and they have no idea. And no one will, from the Army Corps of Engineers, will say exactly how they received the order and why they executed it that way. That's one issue.
Yes.
Now multiply that across the entire federal government right now.
Okay. Unfortunately, I can't do follow-ups on this because we got to see who else wants to ask questions. Professor,
there was a question in the chat early on, and we skipped over it, but I want to make sure that we get all of the questions in the chat too.
Well, go ahead. If I'm not good at the chat, so if you have it, go ahead and answer.
It was early on. Let's see. I don't see powerful men come along as how history works. It seems more like conditions create times in which everyone wants to go along with one dude or dudette. Is this a useful view? Across history, are there common conditions that nudge the populace? Is it worthwhile to ignore the big important dude? And what do we do about hero worship? I don't see how powerful men come along. Yeah, it seems right.
That was me, and I apologize for the odd wording. I think all I'm talking about is populism.
Yeah, the answer is that and this is funny because I just taught it in my class yesterday. Populism is and will always exist in the human condition because the origins of populism are just in the origins of human beings. We all have confirmation bias. We all seek patterns, and we all seek patterns in a way that flatter ourselves. That's always true. And there will always be populist demagogues, is what our founders would have called them, who come along and try to take advantage of this. And it's one of the things that our system was designed to try to prevent. And even from the origins of the country, even while the country was being founded, there were people who objected to how the founders put our system together because they wanted something that was more responsive to the popular will. But our founders wanted to make sure that the American people never got what they wanted. which I know seems strange because we're so far removed from teaching that that it seems
Understood.
yeah, but our system is designed to force reflection and choice and get away from accident and force. Populism seeks to act through essentially majority rule, implementing, desire, taking desire and putting it into action. And reflection and choice means that when you want something, you don't get it. You have to wait, then reflect upon it. And then you have to convince people who don't have that common interest with you, somebody who doesn't, if you're a fish salesman, you have to convince someone who doesn't sell fish that what you want to do about fish is a good idea. And then we will know that you are making that the culture as a whole, that the people as a whole are making a choice. So it's reflection and choice. And so our system is designed to make sure that your desires are never turned into action. And so it's always going to be appealing to people when they say, what I want is action, and I don't care how it comes about. But that's also why we had the earlier conversation about why process is important, why we need to actually focus on process.
So, Professor, to tie one issue together on that, if President Trump really wants to get rid of birthright citizenship, we have a process to do that. It's Congress and the states, but I don't see that bill being introduced. Maybe I've missed it. Maybe there is a bill, and maybe Congress will debate it. But we have to have reflection on it, right?
You got to have a constitutional amendment too.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. It just is like if somebody says, I want my car cleaned, but they don't go out and wash their car, I think, well, you don't really want your car cleaned, do you? If you say you want to get rid of birthright citizenship, and you don't propose a constitutional amendment, I don't believe that you actually want birthright citizenship. I think you just want to say that you want birthright citizenship. Or you want to get rid of birthright citizenship,
Yeah.
I always believe people after they start working towards something. But if they don't ever start working towards something, I'm just like, oh, well, I don't know. People say stuff all the time.
Let's see if we can, sorry to interrupt you. Let's see if we can get a question from Susan, Hope, Phil, Reverend, and Sandon. You're welcome to have another bite at the apple. And then, of course, our longtime partners, Bart, Jake, you're welcome to jump in too. Who wants to speak? Take yourself off mute and ask a question or a comment of the professor. Or are you all just observers today? Reverend, Susan, Hope? You're not used to it. Can you ask it in your own words, or are you driving, Hope?
I can speak. I'm so overwhelmed with my own thoughts. I don't even know what to address. I mean, which I guess a lot of us have heard is the point. And I'm sorry I missed the first part of the meeting because there was some scary traffic stuff. People don't know how to drive in the rain because we get so little rain here in LA. Anyway, I'm a Californian. I just went through the fires. I just dealt with that water release. I think it was just another publicity stunt on his part that went bad because he doesn't think ahead far enough to realize that it's going to catch up with him. I think he has CEO-itis or CFO-itis. They go hand in hand. I know several CEOs in my own life. And if people are just sycophants all around you all the time, you're not in a position of having to work with anybody. You are kind of like a king. You're not used to having to reach across the aisle. You're not used to having to go to Congress. You're used to just saying, this is how it's going to be, and especially because he's been such a horrendous business person, not a moral person. If you're not moral and you don't care about any harm coming to anybody, you're not going to think ahead about your actions.
So do you want the professor to reflect on your comments, or do you have on those comments, or do you have a question?
No, I guess my question, because of my existential fear, is ultimately, is he even impeachable? I mean, he's not impeachable anytime soon because he's got the House, he's got the Senate, he's got the Supreme Court. That really scares me. So even if we attack things through the courts and try to stop him, if anything goes to the Supreme Court, is Amy Coney Barrett or Brett Kavanaugh actually going to do the right thing?
I think they will actually, by the way. But Professor, what's your reaction? Anything that Hope has
Yes,
said
of course.
or question?
Yeah, of course, President Trump is absolutely impeachable.
Okay.
The Richard Nixon won the largest, one of the most impressive election victories in American history in 1972, with giant majorities,
Right.
and swept all of those elections. And within a year, he was resigning in disgrace. And he did so not because Democrats were going to vote to remove him from office, um, um, but it was because Republicans were. And um, and I don't know exactly, you know, why you not have greater faith in the Supreme Court. President Trump was the most overturned president in American history by this Supreme Court.
I guess it's partly Roe versus Wade, and because they also, have given him some sense of immunity, and not everything. They didn't give him everything, but they gave him enough to terrify me. And you think he's impeachable even with this Congress as it sits now? Not even if we're not waiting for anything to flip. With this Congress right now, as it sits, you think that they would actually possibly vote to impeach him as a group with what he's doing now?
um, yeah, I mean, depends on what he
Okay.
does.
Yeah. Okay.
If if uh, if if he does, and in most of these cases, it would come down to, because he seems to be willing to do illegal things all over the place, and then the system stops him. But I think the test will be what happens if if, say, the Supreme Court makes a ruling and then he ignores it,
Mm-hmm.
or if he actually said to the military, no, don't listen to this court order. If you ended up with um, uh, him using the police or the military to do something that had been blocked by a court order or a judge or by the law, then I think you would see people say, okay, now you've gone too far.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
And
Professor, by the way, I concur with
but
that.
also, and then as far as the immunity, the presidential immunity, just to remind you, you know, they essentially just sent that question back to the lower courts. It was not quite
Okay.
um,
Maybe I
blank
misunderstood.
of an immunity as it was widely reported. And yeah, I guess Roe versus Wade being overturned was right. I don't know.
Pretty bad when
Maybe he
when they
was
were in their
maybe.
confirmation hearings, they both said that it was the law of the land. Those two people I mentioned, they both literally led us down the garden path. So I feel very betrayed by them personally. So, but anyway, women are dying, but that's only one of the many issues that's going on right now. So.
Further reflection, or you want to demur on that, Professor?
Well, I just don't. I don't. I mean, I don't know what I would. Yeah, I guess no further reflection on that. I don't know.
Okay. By the way, I've sworn to uphold the Constitution 5 times, at least 5. I can't remember how many times I did in the military, but at least twice, and 3 times as elected officials. I have great confidence in rank and file bureaucrats and elected officials who swear to uphold the Constitution. And should something, I mean, the other thing, Professor, but in addition to the 2 things that you mentioned, having this young team of Doge employees go through and all our security systems in the federal government, that may be actually an effective way to limit the size and scope of the federal government. I'm holding my ammo on that one. I might support that. But it is a high stakes game. If they get hacked, if they allow some entry in by a foreign government or a hacking group and all our records are revealed to the world, oh my God, no one's going to be happy with the president, no matter how much you like him, if you get your personal finances hacked because of their activities. And he's responsible. So yeah, he could be impeached.
I would just say, in all of those things, if you think that this is a power that the federal government should not have, by all means, please tell your congressman that your congressman should propose a law to roll back the federal power over this thing. Because in a way, Trump is revealing how much power we have given to the government. And if you don't like it, tell your representatives to stop taking control of your life. Start donating to Reason Magazine and you know, but it seems strange when the response is not, you know, that we should just keep punching each other rather than, you know, getting rid of the boxing ring and just saying, you know, maybe we shouldn't maybe we shouldn't have this like physical abuse space that we hop into every day.
To be very clear, the professor is advocating that you talk to your congressman with a specific idea to have them write a law to limit the scope and power of the executive branch. And if they say, well, I'm not, well, why not? I mean, to be very, not
No,
just like, hey,
I've got that. That's a great idea. I will specifically
okay,
call for that. Because I've been actually calling the other way around saying, as a citizen, what can I do as I watch my private information be gobbled up by a private citizen? So thank you for that.
cool. Let's go to Sandon. Kathy, you're going to be hard to ask a question, Kathy, because you just joined us, but you're welcome to if you'd like.
But I want to be more specific about something, like, which is the harder part. Hope, I don't know you, but I hope I don't know if I can call you by your first name, Dimitri.
Oh, Hope is just fine.
Okay. I'm just struggling with pronouncing your last name correctly, but it's that when President Obama issues the DREAM Act by executive order, you have to say, I'm not voting for him anymore. Even though I like the result, I don't think the president should have that power.
Absolutely prefer Obama to Trump, but I don't worship him. I don't think he was perfect either. I mean,
Right,
obviously. So
yeah, but my point is that you can't just advocate for limiting the scope of government when it's doing something that you don't like.
of course not. Right.
Yeah, it's that you have to start saying, okay, no, we're going to have to be in charge of this in our cities, in our towns, in our counties, and in our states.
Yeah, because what would likely happen, say that I guess 40,000 workers so far have already said they'll accept the offer to not work till September and get paid. Who knows what actually is going to happen on that? But say all 2 million quit. Well, they'll hire 2 million new people, and then 2 or 4 years later, they'll hire another 2 million. I mean, you know, things will, and so we got to be consistent, though. If all of a sudden 4 years from now, a new president just hires another 2 million people, really? Is that how we want government to be?
And to just get back to the Roe versus Wade, right? Roe versus Wade just devolved this back to the states. It just said this is no longer a federal issue.
Yes, and that's really dangerous for a lot of women. So,
but
women are literally dying.
But my point is, when you're saying, there's a little bit of a contradiction there. That if you're saying
I see. I know. I mean, everything's not black and white, right? I mean, I'm not a historian like you are, but I watch history too, and it's not black and white. And however, you know, I'm a woman, so I'm duly pissed off because this isn't just about voting rights. This isn't about buying power. This isn't about regulating my water. This is about my body. So I shouldn't have even brought it up. I'm sorry I brought it up. It's a different discussion, but there are women dying. I have friends who are attorneys in Texas trying to save the lives of women who are already mothers, and it's not okay. That's different. That's a different subject matter. It's kind of like saying, oh, well, don't be mad at all Republicans, back when Trump was being considered a first time. He's not all Republicans. I have many Republican friends. I'm not mad at Republicans. He is not. He is an anomaly, and we all know it. Anyway, moving on. I don't want to digress.
And
Yeah,
and
I
hope
just want to make the point that it's very easy to stand for these principles when it doesn't touch on something you care about. The hard part is to stand for these principles when it does touch on something that you care about.
No, I understand that. I really do understand that. There's a difference between human rights, general human rights, and then the littler laws. I mean, voting rights is a very important right as well, but it's not carving into somebody's, autonomy over their own body. Anyway, I don't want to digress.
Yeah, thank you. And you're always welcome to add that in. We have had two entire conversations dedicated just to that issue. My guess is we'll do a third in the future. Okay. Susan, Phil, Kathy, Sandon, we're over time. So ask a quick question and we'll declare victory. Or make a comment. Are you mad at the professor? I don't care. Give us some kind of feedback. You're all of you are on mute, so you don't want to talk.
I'll always hop in, so feel free to always stop me. Why is Congress not jealous of its power? Let me ask that more specifically.
And quickly.
Why are the centrists in Congress not jealous of their power versus the idealists or the ideologues who are always going to be making a lot of noise?
And quick answer, Professor.
They no longer value that power. They don't see it as, they have bad values about that. That's the shortest answer I could give. Do you want more than that? They have the wrong heroes. How about that?
They prioritize winning, and they're on the winning team right now over their own institutional strength. Yeah.
They value being on CNN more than they value being like George Washington.
Cool. Is that good enough, Sandon?
Works for me.
Thanks. Susan, you're up.
I don't really have a question. I appreciate this dialogue and the information that was shared. What I grapple with on a daily basis is what's true, what's not true. The misinformation that's floating around is just making my head explode. And when it's passed on by people I know and how they can even post some of the stuff that they post without really reading it first and realizing how ridiculous it is that I could spend my entire life correcting everyone I know about everything they post. And there has to be a better way. There has to be real information out there.
And you're not talking about weirdos on the internet. You're talking about your real friends.
I'm talking about real people. Yeah. People who, I only have about 350, 360 Facebook friends because I don't deal with the universe. I just deal with people I actually know. And, on both sides, Republican, Democrat, in the middle, undecided, whatever. And, a lot of them are people I grew up with, people we have the same educational background, and the idiocy and craziness and ranting that comes out, which is do nothing stuff and such misinformation that just riles up other people is, that's my rant for today. Happy Friday.
Glad I'm not the only one. Thank you. Professor, reaction to that?
Yeah, again, we don't work for the Dispatch and we don't work for the Free Press, but I will say, if you want good news, you have to pay for it. And not only do you have to pay for the Dispatch and read the morning Dispatch every morning, but you also have to just stop reading, completely get out of all of that free media, social media news stuff that's being pushed. So you have to do both parts. You have to take in good sources of information, but you also have to, because one of the natural things as human beings we have is we hear somebody say something, it's like, oh, well, I'm sure there's a grain of truth to it. Sometimes there isn't. Like sometimes there isn't even a grain of truth to it.
So,
And we've
Professor,
already mentioned The Office. We should mention Friends. Sometimes it's what Joey on Friends called a moo point. It's the point that a cow would make, right? It is something that like you should just. It's a moo point. It's yeah, like you should treat that like and get all of that out of your news diet. It's not news. Stop even thinking of it as being. Don't even think of it as junk food. Think of it as poison. Treat.
You've been articulate. I won't add on. Phil or Reverend, this is your last call to ask a question before we hang up on each other. Same with you, Kathy. If you want to add something in late, Jake, Bart, last call, anyone. I'll give you 5 seconds to take yourself off mute.
There are
All
three
right.
new messages. Let's check the last messages. Okay. I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. But
Yeah,
since you said one of these guys is a pastor, let's just also emphasize the role that weekly church attendance can have in getting your head focused on where it should be. You know, that it's one of the keys to human happiness, and just or as Dwight Eisenhower said, everyone should go to church, and I don't care which one it is. Some version of that was something Eisenhower said. My favorite I'll tell you one Eisenhower story that is also kind of funny, which is that he wanted to set the precedent of starting cabinet meetings with a prayer. And one time there was and if you don't know this, his Secretary of State was a guy named John Foster Dulles, who also, if you ever have trouble sleeping, feel free to read this book called The Spiritual Writings of John Foster Dulles, a book that I have actually read, which are just his speeches on, matters of spirituality. Anyway, he was a Presbyterian. So some matter of great import started, and they just started talking about the issue. And Eisenhower stops. He says, "God damn it, Foster, we forgot the prayer." Anyway,
that's this whole story.
yeah.
I like it. I'm the granddaughter of 2 ministers, so I'm chuckling here. I was muted while I was chuckling, but I get it. I like it. It's funny.
Fair enough. Okay, Professor, you get to.
Jake's got something. Jake.
I just want to
Jump in, Jake.
point out an inaccuracy. Eisenhower was not the one that called for prayer in his cabinet meetings. His Secretary of Agriculture was Ezra Taft Benson, who later became president of the LDS Church.
Yeah.
Benson is the one that called for a prayer at the start of every meeting.
But didn't Eisenhower start the national prayer like
the prayer breakfast? Yeah, so he started that. But in terms of calling for a prayer at the start of every cabinet meeting, it was Benson.
Wow. Love history, high school history teachers correcting PhD college history professors. Well done, Jake.
By the way, I'm not conceding that that's true.
Right.
I'm just conceding that I need to look it up again.
Right. I already made the decision. You'll have to appeal. Okay. So, Professor, I've tried to give you the skeleton and some ribs and then some like points of interest, like eyeballs and lips and stuff. But I haven't flushed out the whole topic of what this was about. From the types of questions I've asked in the current setting of where we are in the new Trump administration and the role of citizenship. That's why we're doing these 18 shows we've done. Can you give somebody who just tuned in, Kathy, for example, if they missed the class, I'm sorry you didn't miss the class, Kathy, thanks for joining us, but if they miss most of the substance of the conversation, and gosh, I hate it that you're still sick. Sorry to ask you a question when you need to cough. If you just tuned in and you only had 1 minute to think about how to be a better citizen in today's environment, what does this conversation encapsulate? What should we take away?
Well, since this is supposed to, I think, be about the legal world, I'll start with that. I would say pay attention to an organization called FIRE. They tend to be a very honest broker when it comes to free speech issues, And if you feel like you would like to support their work, feel free to donate to FIRE. And I think their website's thefire.org. Is that right, Jake? You double check that. And then if you are also inclined to learn more about the limited government world, if you want better arguments, I would say start stealing from our libertarian friends. I'm not a libertarian, but if you want the best arguments about, and I would say if you're a liberal and you want to talk to a conservative and actually change his mind, you need to start reading Reason Magazine. You need to start using their language and their words when you make your argument, because that's the only way you're ever going to change someone's mind. And then if you are a principled conservative and you would like to support the smarter version of what Trump sometimes says he wants to do, two organizations that I know about, the Alliance Defending Freedom and the Pacific Legal Foundation, if all you're interested in is just donating money, I would say if you're a liberal and you want to change people's minds, read Reason Magazine. If you are a conservative and you want to advance the legal or good version of what Trump wants to do, look at Pacific Legal or the Alliance Defending Freedom. If you want somebody who's just kind of across the board going to support the First Amendment, so so get involved in the world of FIRE. They're a great organization. Instead of reading a news diet of bad information, go and spend 1 hour a week with both political parties. Just go to the meeting of the central committees of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and don't say anything. Just listen and learn and promise, and just say, I'm not going to say anything at these meetings for the first 3 months that I'm there. No matter how angry it makes you and no matter what you overhear, just go to the meetings for 3 months. And then come back. Then I would say, purge your news diet, get rid of don't read your emails in the morning, all of those emails that you get for fundraisers, delete all of them before you even look at any of them, and then subscribe to the Dispatch. Get that morning newsletter. Actually, subscribe to all of the Dispatch newsletters before you read anything else, and you'll be better off for it. There you go. There's my solid, advice. And to do all of those things before you respond to a single comment on Facebook, because each of those things is going to do more to actually change society. And I only say this if you want to feel better about yourself, or if in a minute and for a minute, but make yourself more permanently unhappy, then by all means get on Facebook and start commenting. What you will do is you will feel better for a minute and you'll feel worse for the rest of your life. But if you actually want to change things, you need to engage in actual citizenship. That's my sort of put a bow on it advice.
Excellent. And we're going to end with that since we've gone a full hour and a half. Professor, thank you so much for your time. Newcomers, you can always see where we host these and the time that does change on TOOTLE Talks. It's a Facebook group, so you could go there occasionally. Sorry, Professor. You can go to Facebook occasionally. These are all on Spotify and YouTube. So if you'd like to look up anything on every imaginable topic, we've probably covered it, and we probably will in the future. Reverend Miller, I realize you're recovering and you're going to be stronger here soon, so you'll be able to use your voice more effectively in the future. Professor, thanks again for everything, and let's declare victory. Have a good day, y'all.
Thank you.